By now, we all know that most attempts to turn Japanese anime into any kind of live-action movie or TV series have ended in disaster. The most famous example of this is probably Dragon Ball Evolution, which, from what I heard, was so bad that it motivated Akira Toriyama to come back and create Battle of Gods, which then eventually became Dragon Ball Super. Don't forget there was a Death Note film, which I think came around 2016, 2017, and that sucked, but it had Willem Dafoe playing Ryuk, which was perfect casting.
A dream. I like that. Dreams are places you can have fun, right?
I also want you guys to know that this is not some thing versus thing Japan sort of deal. Just because I named Hollywood films so far does not keep Japan safe from this rule. They actually made their own Attack on Titan movies, but they changed its plot so that that version of the story took place in a post-apocalypse. You can actually find screenshots of characters using rifles and walking by destroyed helicopters and buildings and stuff. It's only recently that adaptation quality has improved. There was a Japanese City Hunter movie that came out which I thought was a fun watch, and the One Piece live action is doing pretty good. But again, these are just some diamonds that you find in a sea of coal that has existed for years. But there is still a single movie franchise that has, for all this time, stood above the rest. It's managed to buck this trend for basically more than a decade now. It started back in 2012. It's a 5-film series starring Takeru Sato called Rurouni Kenshin. Now you might not think that these are the absolute best adaptations of anime, and if you've got any others that are great, let me know. But I personally believe that these films were at least trendsetters. They set the bar for adaptation quality pretty high up right from the start. So, in this video, I want to talk about what the Kenshin films do right and what other adaptations do wrong. First off, a good sign for any adaptation is that it can stand on its own as a solo product. If you know nothing, and you go in and watch the thing, it should still be good. There are some adaptations that can be passed off as not being adaptations at all. For example, until I finished the series, I had no idea that Alice in Borderland was based on a manga at all. There are other shows like this. You might think I'm going to start with the action, which I'll get to, but there is something very important that they do right that a lot of live actions actually fail at these days, and that is the costume and set design. The world that these characters inhabit has to feel real. Even if you know it's not, even if it's in space or another fantasy world, there are still ways to trick the audience's brain into believing they can visit those places. The costumes in the Kenshin films are fantastic because even if they're new, they always have some degree of wear and tear on them. This is something that I've noticed some fantasy and history stuff fail at. Either the costumes are so bland that they take you out of the story, or the set that the actors are standing in is blatantly fake. The infamous shot from this Spider-Man film is just one example. And it's not like one of those situations where we don't know how, we don't have the technology. In fact, we had the technology decades ago. You guys remember Pirates of the Caribbean? You guys remember Davy Jones? You guys remember Iron Man 8? My point is that it's a matter of vision and a matter of how much effort the team is willing to put in. But I think that good costuming is really what puts you in the world of whatever you're watching, because everything feels tangible. Even if you have a CGI background or something, as long as the characters, what they're wearing, their accessories are definitely real, you can, to a degree, imagine yourself standing there with them. My next point is character writing and changing things around. The character writing in the Kenshin films is great. Obviously, they had the anime to work off of for this. And ideally, having, base material to work off of should make your job easier if you actually respect whatever you're adapting, but there's an epidemic of people failing to do that. Even if the films change some stuff around because they're live action and because you can't fit an entire series worth of things into a couple of hours, the basic story and character beats are still all there. This, plus the fact that the film franchise stands on its own, means that you can watch all the movies as a self-contained thing and as an adaptation. These will give you different perspectives, but I don't think either perspective would take away from the quality of the films. This is important because sometimes a show or movie can be well made, but it still fails to capture even a little of what it claims to adapt. I think that the Sonic films did something similar to what I'm talking about here. Now, were they inaccurate to the original characters and story? To a degree, yes. I genuinely don't know how bad it was because I was never into Sonic. But if you know more about it, let me know if they got the general idea of each character across correctly. Because if they did, that's kind of what I see as a good sign. Even if you have to change the characters, they can never become what I call in-name onlys. So changing their costumes, color schemes, behavior, or designs drastically is never a good sign. I'm looking at you, Eddie Shankar. I don't know if he worked on the Splinter Cell Death Watch series on Netflix, but I'll say this for now. The only time you see Sam Fisher is in the flashbacks. It's so bad that he doesn't even look like his Rainbow Six counterpart, which I'm already not a fan of. You compare all that to the Kenshin films, where you can see each character and match them to their anime counterparts. Even if there are some changes because obviously animation is not real life, you know who everyone is if you look at screenshots of the movie and screenshots of the manga or anime. In terms of characterization, new viewers should get a pretty decent idea of Rurouni Kenshin's overall story and point, like its morals, the message it's trying to get across. This is a major flaw that things like DMC's Netflix adaptation fail horribly at. For example, in terms of getting general ideas across, the blood rain scene can be found in live action and animated form. Key moments are not omitted from the Kenshin live action films for the sake of prioritizing the movies over the anime. These are adaptations, and they seem to know that, and in a way they take advantage of that fact. Now what I mean by that is that they change the films in a way where it will make sense to people who are fans of the original. Think about it this way. The anime has Kenshin using the Hiten Mitsurugi sword style. And of course, in the anime this has special effects and stuff like that, but the movies obviously can't do all that. They have to adjust it. They still get the main point across. Both Hiten Mitsurugis are incredibly powerful, but the movie makes you think that this is what the anime version of Kenshin would have moved like if he was a real person. And creating this effect is one of the greatest things that a live-action adaptation of anything can do. It takes the story and the people in that story and it puts it in real life. A proper adaptation of a character, for example, I think should line up with most people's imagination of what they would look, sound, and move like if they were a real person. Some of the wackier aspects can be removed in favor of realism, but there's still a condition to making those changes, which is whatever changes you have to make cannot be so drastic that they turn a character into an in-name only. That means that you just end up with an original story wearing the skin of something that people actually love. And I think that these Rurouni Kenshin movies pass that test. They keep the core traits of the characters and the core events in the story while having to change other stuff around so that the movies as their own thing don't end up looking ridiculous or rushed or drawn out. You acknowledge that real life is not animation while changing what needs to be changed because of that fact. And you also innovate because this is a different situation. It gives you different things to experiment with. This can be seen in how the movies adapt the action. For example, Kenshin uses Batojutsu, which is sword drawing, and the movies don't stray away from that. They still keep that base aspect. The amount of work that these actors put into the stunts, by the way, is just plain insane. In case you didn't know, Makenyu, who now plays Zoro in the One Piece live action, played Inishi, who is Kenshin's final opponent in the movie series. And if you've seen the Kenshin films, you'll notice a big difference in how fast Makenyu can move and how much he slows it down for the One Piece show. I think that if you watch the movies, you'll have a much better opinion of Japanese action and stunt work than you did before. A lot of their action movies are all about fast-paced movements, very physical stuff. And yeah, this goes for Asian martial arts cinema in general, but I think that, you can always see something new. So this, in my opinion, avoids a big trap that a ton of adaptations fall into, where it makes you feel jealous of the originals, especially if they're animated. You start to think, oh, I wish that they could do this stuff that the animated versions could. The films here avoid that, where you can see how they're clearly two different ways of moving, fighting, acting, and so on. They have different visions, and the best part is that one does not overtake the other. What I will say is this: once you see these movies, I really think that your standards for historical action will go up, and historical movies in general, especially since even if modern history films get, the costumes right and stuff like that, the color grading is awful. Everything's gray, brown, everything's miserable. The Kenshin films managed to avoid that. Even if they're dark and serious looking, there's still color there. I'm also going to play a bit of a fight scene from the Golden Kamuy live-action movie. It's really come to be one of my favorite manga. I haven't really watched the anime. I think the manga does it better, but if you like Golden Kamuy, check out the live-action, at least a little bit of it. They don't have the same action director, but this is what I meant way back when I said that Kenshin was a trendsetter. If you compare the two, I think you'll see a bit of influence from Kenshin's action onto a lot of other live-action anime movies. The pacing of the fights here is really similar. Although, that might just be the overall Japanese fight scene method, since each, sort of cinema has its own trademark thing that it does. Anyways, that's all for this video. Now, if you guys want me to talk about other adaptations, good or bad, be sure to let me know. It could be fun. Again, I've already seen some people talk about Netflix DMC Season 2, but from what I've seen, it has basically nothing to do with the games anymore. There's no point comparing the characters, plot, or anything there. Usually, you'll notice that the first seasons of these shows are bait. Bad bait, because the trailers are even better bait. After season 1 of all these shitty adaptations, usually it turns into an in-name only show, to the point where there's no point comparing any of it. There's no similarities, and you just end up talking about an original story with stolen names and some stolen iconography. But yeah, man, good or bad movies or TV shows, adaptations of games, comics, whatever, let me know. Also, tell me what you guys thought of the Kenshin films themselves and in comparison to the originals. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.